Well, I'm actually working on this matter with Mr. Andrew Pilgrim on behalf of the family. In reality, their next move really is simply to find out what happened. That's the most important thing, and that's the focus of our representation, to assist them in finding out what happened, as well as to ensure that there are open lines of communication between the Royal Barbados Police Force in terms of their investigations, as well as the Office of the Coroner in terms of the investigations that the coroner must engage in.
In a situation like this, what is the procedure for this investigation?
Well, I cannot speak specifically to the procedure that the Royal Barbados Police Force will adopt, but I would imagine that it would have to entail interviewing any persons who can give evidence in relation to what transpired on the day in question, any persons who may have seen or observed Corey shortly before his death, as well as any persons who were present who would have found him. The investigation obviously would also have to entail a post-mortem examination being conducted on his body, and the results of that guiding the overall conclusion as to the cause of death.
What measures are in place to ensure that this is a fair investigation?
I certainly can't speak to what measures the Royal Barbados Police Force will have in place. I do know that they obviously are in the business of investigating these types of matters, and I would imagine that they would have a set procedure to ensure fairness and that the investigation is conducted in an entirely unbiased manner. My role, of course, is to observe the investigations and to follow up with the persons who are responsible for them, so that I can ensure that as much as possible they are being fairly conducted, as well as the fact that the coroner has a responsibility, of course, to investigate any unnatural deaths, and that responsibility can actually extend to requiring that an inquest be conducted. In that situation, the Royal Barbados Police Force would, of course, make available all information that they have relative to the investigations. The family would be able to be represented. Any persons who have evidence related to what took place and the cause of death may give evidence during those proceedings, and essentially a completely unbiased and independent third party in the form of the coroner will make the determination as to the cause of death. So even if someone may consider there might be concerns about the Royal Barbados Police Force investigating the matter, there is still the Office of the Coroner to ensure that overall the decision that is made in terms of his cause of death will be made in an entirely unbiased manner.
Are there any laws or rules or facilities to monitor the treatment of persons while they are in police custody?
There are rules that govern the rights that persons in police custody have. The judge's rules primarily govern those rights, as well as certain sections in the Constitution will be found to govern those things. Obviously, persons in custody will have to be treated fairly. They're entitled to an attorney or to speak to a third party once the police are satisfied that that will not interfere with the conduct of the investigations. There are provisions made in law at present for interviews to be conducted on video. That has not been fully formalized, but it has taken place in a number of matters. However, outside of that, I'm not aware of any specific rules that govern how a person is treated in the police station, and rules that govern observing such persons, such as videos and so on of them while in custody, for example, if they're in a cell or what have you. And I'm wondering whether this might be a time that we can look at perhaps doing that to ensure that persons who may be interested in committing suicide are consistently monitored and cannot do that while in police custody, as well as ensuring that persons who are in police custody are always treated fairly by the Royal Barbados Police Force.
So for the general information of our audience, we would like to ask some questions. This is in relation to when you are entering police custody. The first question is, do you have to go with the police to the station if they stop you and they say they want to talk to you but down at the station?
Technically, no. You do not have to go with them unless they actually arrest you. But I would ordinarily advise that you cooperate with the police as much as possible, but as a safeguard for yourself and to ensure that if issues do arise, you're properly represented, you should take the opportunity to call a family member or a friend or even an attorney that you may know to ensure that proper representation can be given to you, and to ensure that if matters do arise, criminal matters do arise, and there's a possibility of criminal charges, that your interests can be properly represented throughout.
Can the police arrest you because they suspect you committed a crime?
Yes, they can. All they must have is a reasonable suspicion that you committed a crime, and they can arrest you. However, the power that they have to arrest will depend on the type of crime. So there's some crimes for which are known as arrestable offenses, or offenses which, according to general law, a person can be immediately arrested for, such as a breach of the peace. Even an offense such as murder, an arrest can take place without a warrant. However, there are others that a warrant must be issued in order for the person to be arrested, and those warrants would ordinarily be signed by a justice of the peace. The police would go to that justice of the peace and indicate what information they have and the basis that they have for needing to arrest this person for this particular offense, and the warrant would be signed by the justice of the peace if he or she is so satisfied.
Once under arrest, what are your rights?
Once you're under arrest, of course, you are entitled to have an attorney present throughout the questioning. You're entitled, in some instances as well, to have a friend present as opposed to simply an attorney. One of the other things that you're entitled to be fed and to make sure there are facilities there for those things to take place. And you must also understand that whatever you say can be taken down in writing and used against you. So you have a right ultimately to remain silent throughout the investigations, or of course you can choose to state your particular position.
How long can the police keep you without charging you?
There's no specific time frame. The courts will determine what is reasonable based on the circumstances of the case. It is quite usual, especially in a murder investigation, for a person to be in custody for in excess of 4 or 5 days because of the extent of the things that need to be done in order to complete the investigation. There are things that involve questioning, yes, but there are aspects of the investigation that have to be conducted, including having a psychiatrist confirm that you are fit to plea, ensuring that you go and you view the scene. All of those are things that can take quite a bit of time. Obviously, in a more trivial matter, such as a matter of simple theft, you would expect that a person would go to court in a much shorter period, perhaps in 2 to 3 days. But there is no specific time frame. It will just depend on the circumstances. If time passes and it appears to be unreasonable, of course, an attorney can make an application to the High Court for the individual to be released, unless just cause can be shown for why they should be kept longer than the time that they've spent already.
If the police arrest you, but they subsequently do not charge you, what can you do?
It honestly depends on the circumstances. If you are arrested and they investigate and they discover that you are not guilty of an offense and they release you, I suppose you will have two options. The first option only arises where they never really had a reasonable suspicion that you committed an offense. If the police simply come and they arrest you without having a basis for it, for connecting you to this particular offense, then you might have an option in terms of malicious prosecution. You might have an option in terms of unlawful arrest or unlawful imprisonment. Those are options that are available to you. However, once they have a reasonable suspicion, that suspicion itself might not necessarily lead to you being charged if information comes to light that shows that you're not involved. In that case, you actually don't have any particular recourse, because the police obviously are entitled to conduct their investigations and to ensure that all persons who could possibly be responsible for a particular offense are questioned and have an opportunity to state their position.